Welcome to Bloodbath and Beyond. Today we review The Guest. Be careful who you let in.
Written by Simon Barrett, directed by Adam Wingard, and starring Micah Monroe, Dan Stevens, Brendan Meyer, and Sheila Kelly. This movie's about David, a soldier who was recently discharged and made his way to the Peterson residence to fulfill a promise to take care of the family of his best friend who was killed while serving alongside David. Upon his arrival, a bunch of accidents and mysterious deaths start to happen around him, and there might be more to David than meets the eye. This is actually a recommendation from our top donator over on Patreon, Deke. He recommended this to us, and I'd actually seen this before twice because it was actually on a best of list, which is kind of a spoiler for this review, I guess. But this is from Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett, who worked together quite a bit. They did You're Next, and they also did the reboot/sequel Blair Witch. Never did a full review of it, so here we go. What do we like?
I really like all the characters in this film. Everyone does an amazing job acting because this is supposed to be set as a mystery thriller. We don't actually know what is supposed to be going on, and Dan Stevens does a fantastic job because he's delivering a wide range of emotions. At one moment, he's like this super nice guy who's just laughing and having a good time, and then he has this like death stare, intense look that is very intimidating. So to me, he was a fantastic actor and a standout in this film.
The premise is fairly simple. This guy just kind of joins this family, he stays a few days, but you know that there's something off with him, and that like helps. Like his acting, it puts the thriller into this. Like you're like, is everything completely okay? Or is there something weird happening? And the way that it's shot and the way that the music kind of amps up around him suggests something's off, but it seems like he has fairly good intentions. He's kind of like acting like a bodyguard for the boy that lives at the house, as well as the girl who's played by Micah Monroe, who I think the same year was in It Follows, which has a very similar kind of vibe where it's not necessarily all horror, but it has like thrillery genre aspects with crazy, really good 80s synth music. Big fan of the music, by the way. And she crushed it, because she's kind of skeptical of this guy, as I think most people should be. I'd be hesitant.
You understand it from the parents' perspective because they just lost their son who was serving in the army, and then all of a sudden, not a replica of their son, but someone who would clearly fill that void and remind them a lot of their kid is now staying in their house. So they're gonna want to hold on to that while they can.
Right, yeah. They have their own ways of dealing with the grief. The mother wants to cling on to this guy. The father, he's drinking away his problems and he needs a drinking pal to kind of vent to about his job. And all of these characters, it makes sense for a family dealing with grief, how they're all acting, and how this one person can kind of help fulfill their needs in this needing time. I really enjoyed the look and the atmosphere of this movie, but the way that it's shot kind of has a gracefulness to it to an extent. Like everything flows really well. There's some interesting camera work. I think specifically is a point where Micah's just laying on her bed and then she kind of sits up. And that's when I kind of noticed like how good the camera work was.
It is seen as a slow burn, but it's like a good one because it develops the characters in such a way that you start to build these suspicions with the characters. You start to feel what they're feeling. And then in the final act, shit hits the fan and it does not let you down.
Yeah, you get a lot of closure. There's some action scenes, and there's action scenes spread out throughout this movie as well. But they're like little minor confrontations that are just like, whoa, that was kind of badass. I wouldn't mind having this guy around to deal with some bullies back in the day myself.
Whether he's walking in with like 2 kegs or being that sexy stud walking out of the shower showing off his abs.
Right? Like on the flip side, if a girl was staying with us who's just like a smoke show, comes out completely topless, I don't know what I would do. I don't know. I might have done what Micah did and just walk in the door and just just lean against the wall like, oh my god, what the fuck?
Like, that was dreamy. I gotta make this guy a CD.
It's just a mix I made. I could make you one if you wanted.
This film also had probably one of the craziest Halloween dance settings
Yes.
I've ever seen in my life. Not only was this a Halloween high school dance, but they built the most elaborate haunted maze to get to the dance, which I thought was crazy good. I work at a high school, and this would never happen. Like, the budget is unrealistic and the space is unrealistic.
But it would be really cool to have. And the fact that it was a Halloween 3 throwback, because you have the witch, you have the skeleton, and you have the pumpkin mask in the background. Kind of cool. Little nod. That even kind of reminds you, like, this whole movie kind of had very similar, like, not similar tones to Halloween 3 specifically, but kind of like to like an era piece. Like it was like kind of like 80s, like the girl works in a diner. Things feel a little retro. The music sounds a little retro. But it's actually like a modern film, which is kind of cool. And I think those are some of those aspects when you hear like genre film. A lot of people say genre film. Well, what's a genre film? Well, it's something that kind of takes and borrows things from horror movies or would appeal to horror fans without necessarily being straight up a horror movie. And I think this is a really good example of that. Now, what didn't we like? One of the only things that I really had an issue with, which isn't a huge issue, is more like character decisions. Specifically, allowing a complete stranger to have complete freedom in your own house. Like, you can stay for dinner for sure. Fine. You can stay the night. Yeah, you can take my car and go pick up my son. There's a big leap of faith with these people. Like, they had a lot of trust in somebody they knew for 24 hours.
Yeah, especially considering, like, how did you get here? Well, I got off the bus and I ran. How do you not know? He's like, sweet, my plan worked. Got into the family, got a car, now I can get around.
It sounds super suspect to me. And so I get, Micah kind of thinking, something doesn't seem right. She seemed to be the most logical person, and you can kind of understand and see how a character could act this way, but it seems also a little bit unbelievable to me.
It just seems a little far-fetched in the situations with like how David is helping Luke out, just like the way those two interact with each other. It's very different than how everyone else is interacting with David.
Yeah, like they have like this really strong bond immediately. And again, it's something that you can kind of see because it's like, okay, it's a guy, a loner who doesn't have many friends, he's being bullied. This is a strong guy that can help him with his problems. But again, he's just like 100%. This guy's the best. And I do know kids that are like that. I get it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's always the best way to do things.
Even like with like Joel David Moore's character, he's like the pothead local, and when David like interacts with him, it's a funny standoff, which is great.
We support you. Like, oh, America, right?
Bet you wouldn't support us by like enlisting.
It just seems a little too convenient by the way things played out there.
Could you get me a gun?
You can't just walk up to anybody at a party and just say, hey, you got guns? Because the first person that you ask that can't get you guns is gonna go tell everybody else, that guy just asked me for a gun. We need to get him out of this party. You can't fuck that up.
From what I've heard down in the States is not that hard to get a gun if you have the proper ID.
Right, like he's looking for a black market gun, which means that's way more trouble. Like, well, can't you get a gun, sir? You are military. I would have totally not hooked him up. Not a fucking chance. I would have been like, yeah, give me that number. And since I'm taking the number, I just never make that call. I'm not doing this deal. I'm not doing it. I don't care. So little things like that, but again, these are nitpicky things. It's not that we don't like the movie because of that. It's just worth mentioning. Much like every other situation in many other movies, things aren't realistic sometimes. Now it's time for our final thoughts and ratings. I really enjoyed The Guest. It was an interesting movie because you don't really know which way it's going. You have suspicions, and that's what is fun about the movie. Okay, there's a guy, he's kind of acting weird. There are good things and bad things about his character. What's really happening here? And just seeing what he can do for this family and finding out what the reasoning is behind it is an excellent journey. I really liked the way that it was paced. I really liked all of the characters. The acting was excellent. And the soundtrack is just so good. I really, really enjoyed the soundtrack. And just in general, it's a very enjoyable movie. I don't have many like very critical dislikes, even us discussing, some character decisions. It's whatever. I think if you haven't seen this movie that you should definitely watch it. So I'm gonna give this 4 ordering drinks like a boss out of 5.
Yeah, I'd like to buy each one of them a blowjob shop.
Do you wanna buy anything for their fellas?
Let me get each one of those guys at Cosmopolitan.
This film did a really good job telling its story. It is a strong mystery thriller because you get all those aspects through the character development and how this film is shot. You have a fantastic soundtrack and a score that's playing in the background to really amplify the emotions that you're seeing on screen. The cinematography really builds up the situations. You're trying to piece together who David actually is and whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. And Dan Stevens did a fantastic job in this film. He had both ends of the spectrum nailed. My only issues really is a couple of the character decisions, and the final act, as crazy as it is, it does come off as a little more far-fetched and silly in comparison to what you saw prior to this. So with that being said, I'm gonna give this film 4 getting into it out of 5.
Seems like you're not really into this.
Well, I am.
As always, thank you for watching. Like this video and comment below with your thoughts on the film if you've seen it. If you haven't and you do want to check it out, there are links in the description where you can find it. And if you want the opportunity to recommend a movie for us to review, definitely check out the links to our Patreon, also in the description. And if this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, stay updated with everything Bloodbath and beyond.